In this module, we will look at how we can pass inputs to the other pages in our Blue Prism Process Studio, or how we can get the outputs from the nested pages. So here we are inside Blue Prism. We'll create a process and we'll call this input output demo. Enter and click on finish. Let's open this process and maximize it. So we'll create a new page over here. Let's this be page 1, which does nothing. So we'll just join it together, and on the main page we'll add a page reference to an existing page. Select that page, click on finish. Now coming back to page 1, I want to get an input from the main page. So on this page, what we'll do is, whatever the input we get, we'll add 10 to it and return it from here. So we need a calculation stage. Open it. We'll say add 10, and it will get some input which will to which we'll add 10. So let's dismiss this. That input would be coming from the main page. So to retrieve the input, we need to open the start stage properties, and here we can click on the add button, which will add a row to this inputs section, and we can give the name of the input. So this would be input number. If you want, you can give a description which will describe what this input is. Data type, it's a number, and we'll store that in some data item. So let's store this in number to increment. Okay, so we can see here that this is the input name and this is the data item to which we would store this input. So let's click on OK, and let me reopen it. I need to create this number to increment data item, so I'll click on this button, which will create a number type number to increment. Click on OK. So whatever input will come to this page will be stored into this data item. We'll add 10 to it. So let's open this calculation stage, take this data item, add 10 to it, and store it in this data item called final result. I'll create this, click on OK. So let's join this, and it will take this number, add 10 to it, and will store in final result, and that we can send back through this end stage. So to send it back, we can open the end stage properties. We'll add a row, so this will say result, data type is number, and get value from is this final result. So you can see it will expose a number type called result, which will get its value from the final result. So if I now go back to main page, if I open up page 1, I can see here that it has, under inputs, it has a new row called input number, which is type number. So I will pass some number to it. Let's say I pass 25 to it, and if I go to outputs, it's returning me a result which is again a number, and I will store it somewhere. So maybe I'll store it here, output number, create this. So an output number is created for me. Click on OK, and I can see this output number. So let's join this together, reset so that I don't have any errors, and if I now run it, it should that 25 should be passed to page 1, which will add 10 and make it 35. Return that 35 through that end stage, and I should see 35 in my output number. So if I run this, okay, so you can see 25 has come, final result is 35, and I can see output number is also 35. When we have a page hierarchy like this, we can use debugging in a way in which we can either step into those pages, or we can skip those pages, or we can even like debug the rest of the page in one go and move to the calling page. So to do that, we'll run it like this. We'll uh, we'll press this button, so it comes here. If I press just this step over button, it will not go to page 1 and will return with the result. So you can see it has given me 35. Now let's rerun it again. This time I will step into my page. Now once I'm here, I can continue stepping like this, or I can step out of this page. So it will execute rest of the stages in this page and will move to the main page. So if I click on it, I can see I come back to my main page with the result. So using these step into, step over, and step out buttons, we can debug our pages and and see where the problem lies. When we create these data items are available to be used only on the page where we have declared them. For example, here output number is available only to main page. We cannot use it on page 1. So if I go to page 1, open this calculation stage, if I expand numbers, I do not see the data item that was declared on main page. However, if I check this checkbox, view all items, and then expand this, I can see that the output number is available on it's showing on this in this data items on this calculation properties, but we cannot use it. It's grayed out. So data items are only limited to a single page. However, if we want these data items to be available to the other pages as well, we can do that by making them global. The way that we make them global is, if I open this data item, here I have a visibility checkbox. If I uncheck this, which says hide from other pages in the process, now I am no longer hiding it, which means I'm making this data item global, and click OK on it. Go back to page 1, open the calculation stage, expand this. Now I can see that output number is no longer grayed out, and I can use it over here. Okay, so that way we can use data items across the pages. So when you're creating global data items, make sure that you're using unique names. Otherwise, there would be a conflict. And if you're using a global data item, it can be changed anywhere in your process studio. So make sure that the value doesn't get corrupted inadvertently. Now we'll create a process that will calculate a date in the future. So let's create a new page. We'll call this get future date. We'll create a data item. We'll call this number of days. Data type is number, and initial value we'll leave it empty. We'll create one more data item. We'll call this date result. Its data type would be date and initial value left blank. So to add the days to a date, we'll use a calculation stage. Open it, and we'll store the result in date result. To add the days, we need to use a function which is available here, and it's a date function. So let's expand this. Add days looks to be the one which we need to use. So we'll put number of days into the days field, and in the date we'll use today. Actually, let me try again. In days we'll put number of days, and in date let's open this expression editor and we'll use today. Paste. Okay, and we'll paste this. We'll rename this calculation stage to add days. Hit enter. Let's join this. We'll open the start stage, add a row to it. We'll name this days hands, and we'll drag and drop this number of days in store in. So you can see it has automatically detected the data type to be a number based on the data item that I've moved into the store in column. Let's click on OK. So this is the input that it will receive. Similarly, to return an output, we'll open the end stage properties, add a row, give it a name, future date, and that will come from date result. So you can see that future date of type date will be returned from this get future date action or get future date uh, page. Now here on main page, we'll add one more page stage. Click on next. Select get future date, finish, open this. So it takes inputs and also returns outputs. So going to inputs, it needs days hence. So here in outputs, we'll create a data item called my future date of type date. So you can see my future date of type date has been created. On the inputs, we'll say get me the date 30 days from today. Let's click on OK, and we'll make this page part of the workflow. So let me rearrange. Let's debug this. So I'll click on this step over button. Again, I will step over page 1, and again I will step over get future date. So it will add 30 days from today, which gives me 14 December 2016. Not just the sub pages can be supplied inputs from the calling pages, even the main page of a process can accept inputs from external sources. So here on the main page start stage, we'll modify it by adding an input to it. We'll call this number of iterations. We'll make this number and we'll store it in number of iterations. Let's create this. Let's click on before, let's verify. So we have this input which will be stored in number of iterations. Let's click on OK. So we have created a process that takes an input from outside. So all this while we had been running processes inside the process studio, but in the operational environment you're not going to run your processes within the process studio. You would be running them from the control room. So let me close this process. If I go to my Blue Prism virtual workforce, go to the control room, I don't see any available processes over here. By default, processes are not available inside the control room. We need to publish them so that they are available over here. This is a safety feature in Blue Prism which prevents unfinished processes being run accidentally. So let's go back to our studio, open the process diagram, and to publish it, we can open this information stage, and here's a checkbox which says publish this process to control room. So let's check it, click OK, and close this. Now if I go to the control room, I can see my process is available over here. So to run these processes, we can either drag these processes from here onto the available resources, or drag these resources to any one of the available processes. So let me drag them and drop it onto the available resource. This schedules a session for this process on this resource, and its status is pending. This process takes an input value. So let's run this. If I select this and I click on Start Selection, I get a pop-up which says I need to provide number of iterations. So let me provide a value to it, 30, start, and it has finished. So if I have to rerun this process, I need to schedule another session. So, or maybe at this time I will drag the resource onto the process. A new session is scheduled. I'll select that, right click, click on start. Again, number of iterations. If I enter here 25, start, and after some time it should be completed. Usually you do not create processes that accept inputs, because that way you would have to provide inputs from the control room when you're running them. So let's remove that input from our process. So open the start, and we'll remove this row from here. Click OK, and we'll close this. This time let's go back to the control room, and we'll schedule one more session. If I run it, you can see it didn't ask us for any inputs and it ran to completion. Let me show you how we can stop a session. So to give you an example of that, let me make this process a long running one. So if I open it, maybe on page 1 I can add uh, some delay over here. Okay, so before I enter a delay, let me close this. I need to import a utility which provides us that delay functionality. So go to File, Import, Browse. If you go to your Blue Prism installation folder, which would be C drive, program files, Blue Prism Limited, Blue Prism Automate, you would find a folder called VBO. Open that, and here you will find some XML files. These XML files are the business objects that have some functionality that can be used in our processes. So we select the one which has the delay functionality in it, which is utility general. Open. Next. It is imported into the database. Finish. So let's use that. If I go to my process under page 1, I'll take an action stage, open it, say sleep, and use my business object that I had imported. Action would be sleep, and I can provide the time I want to make my process sleep. So I'll make it sleep for maybe 10 seconds. Click on OK. Let's make it part of my workflow. Let's close this. And going back to the control room, we'll schedule another session. If I run this, it will run for 10 seconds, but I can make it stop in between by right clicking and saying immediate stop. So you can see the status is stopped instead of completed. We saw that we can stop the a scheduled session from the control room, and there were two options of stopping. One was immediate stop, which I did, and then the other is a request stop. Let me now show you how request stop works. Request stop is a mechanism by which you can make your process stop at a logical point. Uh, by that I mean that when you are issuing immediate stop, no matter where your process is in the execution state, it will always be stopped then and there. Um, this can lead to some corrupted states, some corrupted entries into your database or your queues. Um, so for that, if you want your process to be in a safe state when before it comes to a stop, you can use this request stop. Now to use this, we need to modify our uh, process diagram a little bit. So I have already done some changes to my page 1. Here what I have done is I have created a loop which will check for a counter, and once this counter becomes 10 or more, this loop will exit. So it will also increment the counter in between. So with this change, let me run this from here. I'll schedule this. It's in the pending state, so let me select start it, and it completed. So one thing that I've made is instead of 10 loops, I have made this a large value for this loop. Increase the loop count so that I get a chance to send a stop request. So I'll schedule one more session. It's pending. Select it. Start. It's running. Now if I right click and say immediate stop, you can see it stopped immediately. Let me open the log for it by double clicking this row, and I can see that the counter was at the value of 2032 and the process was stopped at that point. So it immediately stopped it no matter uh, where I am. Uh, okay, so to use request stop, let me run one more session of it, and I'll say start. It's running. Now if I right click and say request stop, we'll say the status changes to stopping, but it stays in stopping until the entire process comes to a stop. That is, it has no effect on the process. It will continue running because to use request stop, we need to modify our process diagram such that we define a logical point where the process can be stopped, and that point is missing as of now. So this will keep on running for 10,000 iterations, and then or whatever number of iterations I've specified, and then it will stop. So let's do one thing. I'll just terminate this stop selection. Okay, so I use the immediate stop using this stop selection. So to use that request stop, I'll go to Studio, open my process, go to this page, and here let me maximize this. I need to put a point where I can say I'm ready to stop now. So to do that, I'll use a decision stage, which will check if I'm at a logical point where I can stop. So open this decision stage, is stop requested, and to use and to create a logical point, we can use under environment a function called is stop requested, which will check if a safe stop has been requested in the current session. So I can either drag and drop it into the expression area or click on paste. I'll do the former. So I drag and drop it here. This returns a bool value, and if it is true, then we can stop our process. So let's draw some links. So loop again is stop requested. Let me switch because I want the yes to take this path. So switch changes the path. Now this is yes, and this would be no. Now is stop requested. If that is true, then I want this also to stop this iteration. Otherwise, we go to the increment counter. Okay, so let me move this around. So now you can see I'm checking is stop requested, which has a function within it uh, by this name is stop requested, and if that is true, then it will end, otherwise it will continue running. So let's close this. Introduced a logical point to stop the process, and if I go to the control room, schedule one more instance, select that, run it. So we see it's running. Now if I right click and say request stop, you saw it was momentarily in a stopping state and then immediately changed to completed. Whereas in this case, it was in a stopping state forever until the process on its own comes to an end. But that I didn't allow, and I then forced that stop. So let me open the log for this. And here we can see that if you see the log, it's just doing like this. It's checking is stop requested, false. It increments the counter, it loops again, true, then it again checks is stop. So is stop requested is being checked for every iteration. Now when the counter was at this value, is stop requested, the decision becomes true, and when it becomes true, it ends that page and moves to the main page or these or further calculation in from the main page. So that way we can use is stop requested. Just as we can create sub pages and pass inputs to it and get outputs from it, we can also create process sub processes which can be passed inputs, and these sub processes can return us outputs. So just as we have a hierarchy of pages, similarly we can also create an hierarchy of sub processes. So I have made some more changes to this process to enable it to get inputs from the calling process and run iterations based on the number passed from the calling process. So here in loop again, I'm checking for number of iterations, and that number of iterations will be coming from the start stage. So I have made this number of iterations global by unchecking this checkbox so that it can be used on the page 1, and it's being captured by start. Uh, Similarly, what I'll do is I'll make this end stage return some data. So I'll add a row. I'll create a new output called future date, and the value of this will come from my future date. So this is the output. Let's click OK. Let's close this. Process accepting an input and returning an output. Now what I will do is I'll create one more process which I will call as circular path master. Open it, and I will call my input output demo from the circular path master. So here in this process we'll call our input output demo. So to do that we have this process stage. Let me move it here, open it, and from this drop down I'll select my input output demo. It takes an input, number of iterations to be performed. Let's say I want 50 iterations, and then outputs the future date that it will get me. So maybe I can store it somewhere. I'll call this new date. So click OK. Let's join this and we'll make this run. Let's create this, click OK, and let's make it run. So it ran for 10 iterations and it gave me the new date as 15 December 2016. Here we saw that the process was executed as a single step. If we want, we can also step into it. So let's do that. When I step into it, a new window of Process Studio is opened and I can run it. So it goes to page 1. Again, if I want, I can step into it or step over it, or I can step out of this process. So you can try all these three. Maybe I can just step into it. Okay, then come here. So it will go for 50 iterations, which I do not want to do. So what I'll do is I will use this step out. So after 50 iterations it came out of it. I can step over this get future date, which will just execute this in one go, and then again come do like this. So that way I can debug it. So in this module we saw how we can create global data items which are visible to all the pages. We saw how we can pass values from one page to the other and also retrieve the values back. We saw how we can create startup parameters on the main page and the way that we can pass these startup parameters from the control room or from the calling processes. So this completes the module on inputs and outputs. Next we'll talk about the business objects.